Welcome to Geometry, Lesson 1. On your screen, you see two purple dots, but these are not just any old regular dots. These represent points in geometry. The dots represent points in geometry. Usually, these points are named with capital letters. If we connect our points, I'm going to insert a line to connect our points. There's my straight line. When our lines are connected, this is called a line segment. This is called a line segment. It has two clear endpoints. And we're going to go ahead and name our points A and B. Now I have named my endpoints with a capital A and capital B. Whenever I see this circle, that represents the end of the line. Just like in a sentence, when you see a period, the sentence stops. The same thing with the line. When we see that circle, we know the line is over. Because this is a small section, this figure is a line segment. It's a line segment. We see two clear endpoints on this line segment. One way that we could name this line segment is line segment AB, but that would take a little while to spell out. Instead of writing out line segment AB, we're going to just write the capital letter A, capital letter B, and put a line over it. That way we know that it's just a line segment, a piece of it. We could also flip the letters, and instead of AB, we can write BA. It's the same line. So from point A to point B, or from point B to point A. And how we will write that is capital B, capital A, and put a line over those letters. Isn't that a little less to write? Although these are two ways of naming a line segment by its endpoints, remember our circles are called endpoints. Both names, AB or BA, refer to the same segment. How would you describe this line segment to someone who has never seen one before? Let's think about it. How can we describe this line to someone who has never seen it before? We could describe it as it is straight and thin. It has a beginning and an end. It is straight and thin. It has a beginning and an end. Its length can be measured because there is a starting point and an end point, so its length can be measured. So we have a line segment with two clear endpoints, and that is marked by these circles. Remember, a circle is the end. Now, what is the difference between this line? Yes, we have arrows on the end instead of the circles. When we see an arrow, we know that this goes on without stopping, and it can be represented or shown by extending the line segment AB in both directions. This arrow tells us everything that we need to know. This is not the end of the line. It keeps going and going and going. When we look at point B, the same thing. We see an arrow. It keeps going and going. This line will not end. So here is a line. And when we have a point on the end, we have a line segment. To represent this line that never ends, we are still going to use AB. We're still going to use our names here that we have, AB or BA. But this time, we're going to put an arrow at the end of each line to show that the points go on and on. There's no stopping. To name our line, again, we could use BA as long as we have the line with the arrows on the end, or we could use AB. It's the same line. Do we start with A? Do we start with B? It's the same line that we're looking at. So how is a line different from a line segment? How is this line different from this line segment? Yes, this line has no beginning and no end. A line does not have endpoints. It goes on forever in both directions. A line segment with endpoints is just a part of the line. Now, what if we had a line segment that only had one endpoint? It's definitely possible. This is called array. This is called array. It's a line segment that goes on without end in only one direction. So only one direction keeps going and going and going. There is an endpoint at B. Let's look at how we would write this line on our paper. How would we represent it when we write the line? We would write AB, and we can see here that this arrow is by the A side, the side that goes on forever. When B has an endpoint, there's no need to put an arrow. So we're going to leave that line as is. We know the line is over. Is it ever possible to draw all of a line? What do you think? Can you draw all of this line? No, because we do not know where it ends. There's no endpoint, so we cannot draw the line. What about a line segment? Yes, because this is the part that could be measured. There is a beginning point and a clear end point, so this can be measured. What about a ray? Excellent. We cannot draw it. We cannot draw all of this line because it goes on forever. Let's watch this quick reminder together from everything we have learned from lines, line segments, and rays.
We're going to discuss the difference between lines, line segments, and rays. If you take a look at your screen, I have one of each drawn. So we're going to, like I said, go through and talk about the differences between them. So let's take a look at number one, and that's actually a line. And a line, in the geometrical sense, goes on forever in both directions. These arrows here signify that that line goes on forever, like I said, in both directions. So I'll put some notes off to the side here. Goes on forever in both directions. Now, number two, we have a ray. So like we just talked about, this arrow here of the ray signifies that that part of the ray goes on forever. And this dot or point here signifies that that is an ending point. So a ray has a starting point and then goes on forever in the other direction. So I'll put defined starting point. And goes on forever in the other direction. And then lastly, we have line segment. And a line segment has a defined starting and ending point. So these points here, starts and stops, or if you want to consider the right side starting and that the ending point, that's fine as well, but we have a defined starting and ending point. So I'll put starting and ending point. So just to recap here,
a line goes on forever in both directions. Make sure that you have those notes. A ray, there is a defined starting point and goes on forever just in one direction. A line segment, there is a starting and end point. That's not all we have to learn about lines today. Let's take a quick look at parallel lines.
How would you define parallel lines? We know that intersecting lines are the lines that meet at a point. So are lines which do not meet parallel? Like line P and line Q here. They don't meet even if they're extended. Or maybe we can call them lines which do not intersect. Are these definitions correct? This is how most of the students define it, and it is not.
Know that parallel lines, we can see these lines go on forever. They are lines that do not meet. They will never ever cross no matter what, as long as they keep going. Think of an example of parallel lines. Well, if you put your arms straight in the air and just hold them there, that's a great example of parallel lines. If you think about railroad tracks, another example of parallel lines, they go on forever. What would happen if railroad tracks were not parallel? Yes, the train's wheels could not stay on the tracks. The train's wheels could not stay on the track. So it's very important these are parallel lines. If there were two dots here instead of these arrows, they would be called parallel segments. We would know that because the identifying mark would be the circle or the period, that clear endpoint. So a parallel line has your triangles, and a parallel segment will just have a circle here instead. So pay close attention to the end of the lines. Let's roll our sleeves up and get to work with a little practice. In Kami, you have this assignment: points, line segments, lines, and rays. Number 1 tells us to draw and label line segment RT. When we hear segment, a line segment, we know that we have to use our circles. How do we know that? Let's go back to our notes. When I look at my notes, a line segment has 2 clear endpoints. When it's time to draw and label a line segment, the first thing I'm going to do is draw my 2 endpoints because I know it's a segment. It's a beginning and an end. In Kami, we have our shapes. Right below your paintbrush, you can click on shapes. I am going to choose a circle. Just hold down with my left hand, drag with my right. There's 1 endpoint. There's another endpoint. Now, I know this is not going to be perfect because we are in Kami. This line right above my RT lets me know there are 2 endpoints. Now, using my drawing tool, I'm going to insert a line. Not my drawing tool. I'm still on my shapes. You can use your drawing tool if you like, but I'm going to use my shape and just choose insert line. There is my line straight across. Now I have to label it. I have to label where the R is and the T, where is endpoint R and endpoint T. I'm going to my text box. Purple works for me. 24 is a little small. I'm going to choose 36 for my text size and type the letter R. It's still a little small, so I'm going to highlight it. Let's go to size 96. And that's big enough because we are labeling a line segment. Let's label the T. So now I have labeled that second endpoint T. Draw and label line segment RT. That's exactly what I did. I drew it. It has 2 clear endpoints. I used my circles and I labeled it by the letters that were present. R, there's R. T, there's T. What is another name for RT? Yes, we're going to use those exact same letters. So instead of RT, we're going to have TR. We're switching our line around, TR. Do I have to put a line over my TR? Absolutely. That's how I know that it's an endpoint. So I'm going to my shapes, insert line, and I'm putting a line right above my TR. Without that line there, your answer will be wrong. You have to have that line. Let's move on to number 2. Draw and label line BN. Okay, first things first, I can see right away that this line never ends. Because of that, I'm going to use my drawing tool. It's going to be easier for my triangles. So my arrows, drawing a line that never ends. How do I know it never ends? Because of these arrows, it keeps going. Now I have to label this line. Using my text box, I'm going to type the capital letter B. Remember, our letters are capital letter N. Moving it up just a little. So here on my line that goes on and on, So here is my line. I need to label BN. So I am going to insert a shape that lets me know there is point B, there's point N, but it doesn't stop there. Now we have to label a point T on it. That means we can put this point anywhere on our line. So I'm going to choose right here, and a point means another place on your line. And we have to label it T. So now I have a third point T. So make sure that you're reading all the directions. Step 1, draw and label the BN, draw and label line BN. We did that. We added our arrows because I see my arrows here. It lets me know this is a true line. It goes on forever. I also know it's a line because it says line instead of line segment like in number 1. Our second set of directions here are to draw and label a point T, and we did exactly that. What are 2 other names for BN? Think about it. Here's our line, BN. What are at least 2 other names for BN? Yes, NB, we can switch them around. And since we have our T, guys, we could actually say BT or TN. But how would we write that? When we have BT, I'm looking right here, BT. Remember that B ends, so I need an arrow there. I'm drawing my line. Do I have to have an arrow on this side? Do I have to have an arrow here? No, because that's a stopping point right there at T. And then you can go ahead at this time, instead of BN, add N. I'm going to use my drawing tool because that's what I have open. You can also use your text box. Make sure that I can read it. NB, NB. And point NB goes on and on. So I am drawing my arrows and the line right above my NB. Number 3, draw and label ray SL. Since it's a ray, what does that look like? Yes, with a ray, I know only one side has an endpoint and one side goes on forever. If you have to go back to your notes, guys, please do so. I'm going to get you started and you're going to complete it on your own. So let's see what we remember. Because it's a ray, I have a clear endpoint. Then the other point goes on and on. I'm going to connect these a little better. There we go. Remember, it doesn't have to be perfect. I understand. We're working in Kami here. So I drew my ray. Label it at this time. Where will the S go? Where is the L? Pay attention to our arrows. At this time, on your own Kami, label this S and L point. Use your text tool for the S and L. Now draw and label a point R. Remember in number 2, we had to add the point T. You're doing the same thing in number 3. Where will point R be? Wherever you like, as long as it's labeled. What is another name for this ray SL? You're going to type it using your text tool or your drawing tool on this line. Something has to be here. Mine is blank because I want to see your answer. What is another name for SL? Your line should be labeled at this point. Mine is not, but your line should be labeled. Our final step here is to under ray SL. Here's our ray SL. We are going to draw and label ray XM. So we're going to draw another ray and label it XM. So it is parallel to ray SL, meaning they'll never cross. The first thing I'm going to do to draw and label this ray is to see where is my endpoint. There it is above my X, and there's my arrow above the Y. So I'm going to the drawing, to my shapes. I'm going to go ahead and draw it actually. You can use a shape if you like. I'm going to draw it. So there is my point. And these lines are parallel. They will never cross. And I'm going to label it. S. Not S. Sorry about that, guys. It's X, isn't it? My first line is S. X, X, and my second point, M, M. So now I drew and I labeled ray XM. These lines are parallel. They will never meet. Using points A, B, C, and D, create a shape that has two pairs of parallel line segments. I'm going to go to my shapes, go to my insert line, and I'm going to make one line black because it's right there. Where will these lines be that are parallel? Well, A and B and D and C will never touch. So that's one set of parallel lines. I'm creating a shape. And these are line segments. I can see the end point. Now, when I continue, I'm going to choose another color. Let's go with pink. Now I'm going to look at line AD and BC. These lines will never cross. I can draw them forever and they will never cross. The pink will never cross and the black will never cross. So we have two pairs of parallel line segments. Again, we know they're segments because they have an end point at each end. Now, name the parallel line segments. How would you write that? Show me what that looks like. On this final line, I want you on your own to name the parallel line segments. What does it look like to name a line? These are the examples that we see. So if I were to name this line XM or MX, that's what it looks like because it's a ray. Now this is a segment. How will that look? You'll put that on this bottom line. I'm going to do one pair for you. I'm going to go to my drawing tool, and I know that AD, that's one line. A, D, and remember these letters have to be capital letters. And I'm drawing a straight line over the capital letters to show that it's a line segment. What other set would you put here? AD and what other line segment? Put it right here. And then you will have your final pair. Blank and your second segment. That's it, ladies and gentlemen. I know that you are experts on parallel lines, line segments, and rays. Make sure that you have your notes. A ray has a clear endpoint, just like we saw in our video in the beginning of this lesson. There is no endpoint for a line. There's no endpoint for a line. We know this. The arrows go on and on. A line segment has a clear beginning, a clear end. This is the only line that can be measured with clear beginning and end points. Once you finish, please turn in your assignment and submit it on Schoology. Turn in and submit. I can't wait to see your great work.